I'm not sure why I'm posting this now. Maybe because enough time has passed that I can actually type it out without my hands shaking. Maybe because I need someone else to tell me I'm not losing my mind. This happened about 8 months ago when I was working my first job out of college. I'm Sarah, I'm 24, and I work in marketing for a tech startup in Seattle. The company was one of those typical startups where everyone's in their 20s, there's a ping pong table nobody uses, and they call the office a campus, even though it's just 2 floors of a converted warehouse in SoDo. I started in March of last year. The job itself was fine, nothing special. What mattered to me was that I finally had my own income and my own place. I'd been living with roommates since freshman year of college, so having a studio apartment to myself felt like a massive upgrade, even if it was barely 400 square feet. The building was old, built sometime in the 1960s, I think, and it showed. The floors creaked, the radiator made weird clanking sounds at night, and the walls were thin enough that I could hear my upstairs neighbor's TV if he turned it up too loud. But it was mine, and I was proud of it. My apartment was on the 3rd floor, and there were maybe 8 units per floor. I didn't really know any of my neighbors. There was an older guy across the hall who I'd see occasionally, and a younger couple at the end who were always arguing about something. Standard apartment building stuff. Nobody talked to each other much. About 2 months after I moved in, I started noticing something weird. My spare key was missing. I kept 2 keys on my key ring, the main one and a spare, and I'd gotten into the habit of leaving the spare in a little ceramic bowl by my door for emergencies. One morning, I went to grab it because I was getting my main key copied at the hardware store, and it just wasn't there. I tore apart my entire apartment looking for it. Checked coat pockets, checked under furniture, checked everywhere. Gone. I told myself I must have lost it somewhere or accidentally thrown it away. It bothered me, but not enough to change my locks or anything. I was broke and my landlord charged for that kind of thing, so I just let it go. Things were normal for a few weeks after that. Then I started noticing small things that felt off. I'm pretty particular about my space. Not OCD or anything, but I like things in their place. I always leave my coffee mug on the left side of the sink. I always fold my throw blanket a specific way on the couch. I always keep my bathroom door halfway open. Little habits, you know? One day I came home from work and my coffee mug was on the right side of the sink. I stared at it for a good 30 seconds trying to remember if I'd put it there that morning. I couldn't remember. I convinced myself I was just tired and had done it without thinking. A few days later, my throw blanket was folded differently. Not draped over the arm of the couch like I always did it, but folded into a neat square and placed on the cushion. Then my bathroom door was completely closed. Each time, I'd stand there and try to logic it out. Maybe I was more distracted than usual in the mornings. Maybe I was developing early onset dementia at 24. But I knew something was wrong. I started taking pictures of my apartment before I left for work. Just quick shots on my phone of different rooms, different angles. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I did it anyway, and that's when I confirmed it. I took a photo of my bookshelf before leaving one morning. When I got home that night and compared it to the actual bookshelf, 3 books had not moved. They were in different positions on the shelf. I felt like I was going to throw up. Someone had been in my apartment while I was at work. I called the building manager immediately. He came up, looked around, asked if anything was stolen. I said no. He asked if there were signs of forced entry. I said no. He basically told me that without evidence of a break-in or theft, there wasn't much he could do, but he'd keep an eye out, whatever that meant. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat on my couch in the dark, staring at my door, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. The next morning, exhausted and probably not thinking straight, I decided to set up a test. I took a hair from my brush and placed it across my front door frame at knee height, where you wouldn't notice it unless you were looking for it. If someone opened my door while I was gone, the hair would fall. When I got home from work that day, the hair was on the floor. I started staying at my friend Emma's place after that. I didn't tell her the real reason. I just said I was having issues with my radiator and maintenance was supposed to come fix it. She didn't ask questions, but I couldn't stay there forever, and I couldn't afford to break my lease. So after about a week, I went back. I changed my locks myself, even though I wasn't supposed to. I bought a doorstop and wedged it under my door every time I left. I even got one of those cheap security cameras off Amazon and pointed it at my front door. For about 2 weeks, nothing happened. I started to relax. Maybe whoever it was had gotten spooked when I changed the locks. Maybe they'd moved on. Then I checked my camera footage. I'd set it to record when it detected motion. There were dozens of clips of me coming and going, which was normal, but there was one clip, timestamped at 2:47 a.m. from 3 nights earlier, that made my blood run cold. My door opened. Just a crack, maybe 2 inches. It stayed that way for about 10 seconds, then slowly closed again. I was home when that happened. I was asleep in my bedroom when someone tried to open my door in the middle of the night. The doorstop had worked. That's the only reason they didn't get in. I moved out the next day. I didn't even pack most of my stuff, just grabbed what I could fit in my car and left. I broke my lease, lost my deposit. I didn't care. I couldn't stay there another night. I'm living in a different building now, across town. I've been here for 6 months, and nothing weird has happened. I've told myself I'm safe. But here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. When I finally went back to my old apartment with my friend's boyfriend to get the rest of my belongings, I found something. It was tucked under my bed, pushed all the way against the wall where I never would have seen it unless I was moving out. It was a notebook. A small black spiral notebook. Inside were dates and times, dozens of them, spanning back almost to when I first moved in. Next to each entry was a short note. Things like left at 8:14 a.m., returned at 6:32 p.m., or ordered Thai food 7:45 p.m., or shower 10:20 p.m. Someone had been documenting my routine for months. The last entry was from the day I moved out. It just said, "Gone." I never found out who it was. I filed a police report, but without evidence of who had been in my apartment or what they'd done, there wasn't much they could investigate. The building manager claimed they'd checked all the locks and found no issues. None of my old neighbors reported seeing anything suspicious. I still think about that notebook sometimes, about how many times someone was in my apartment while I was at work, about what they were doing while they were there, about the fact that they had a key and could have come in at any time, but mostly chose not to when I was home. Except for that one night at 2:47 a.m. I don't know what they wanted. I don't know if they were just watching or if they were working up to something worse. And I definitely don't know if they followed me when I left. This happened last month. I'm still trying to process it, honestly. I don't know if writing it out will help, but I need to tell someone, and I can't talk to my family about it without them thinking I've completely lost it. My name is Jason. I'm 28, and up until recently, I was a delivery driver for one of those third-party food apps. You know the ones. I won't say which company because I don't want this traced back to me, but it's one of the big ones. I've been doing it for about 2 years now, mostly evening shifts because the tips are better and I'm not a morning person. I live in a mid-sized city in the Midwest, not huge like Chicago, but big enough that there's always orders coming in. The money's decent if you work the right hours, and I like the flexibility. No boss breathing down my neck, just me and my car and whatever podcast I felt like listening to that night. The area I usually worked covered about a 15-mile radius from the downtown core. Mix of residential neighborhoods, apartment complexes, and commercial areas. I'd done probably thousands of deliveries at this point, so I knew the streets pretty well. I had my regular customers, my preferred restaurants to pick up from, the whole routine down. 3 weeks ago, I got an order around 9:30 p.m. It was a Tuesday, so things were pretty slow. The order was from a Chinese place I'd picked up from before, nothing unusual. The delivery address was in a neighborhood I didn't recognize, but that wasn't weird. The app sends you wherever the order is. I grabbed the food, confirmed the order number, and punched the address into my GPS. It took me to the east side of town, an area I'd maybe been to once or twice before. Older houses, lots of trees, streets with no sidewalks, kind of rural feeling even though it was technically still city limits. The GPS led me down this long, poorly lit street. No street lights, just the occasional porch light. The houses were spread pretty far apart, big yards between them. It was the kind of neighborhood where people have trucks in their driveways and maybe a boat covered with a tarp. I pulled up to the address and checked it twice. 4758 Oak Ridge Drive. That's what my app said. And that's what was on the mailbox. But something felt off immediately. The house was completely dark. No porch light, no lights in the windows, nothing. It looked abandoned, honestly. The yard was overgrown, and there was one of those faded for sale signs staked near the driveway, like it had been there for years. I sat in my car for a minute, trying to figure out what to do. Sometimes people order food and forget to turn their lights on, or maybe they're watching TV in a back room and don't realize how dark the front looks. I've delivered to darker houses before. But this felt different. I checked the delivery instructions in the app. It just said, leave on porch. No other details. No gate code, no special instructions, just that. I grabbed the bag of food and got out of my car, leaving the engine running and the headlights on. The beams cut across the front of the house, and I could see peeling paint and weeds growing through cracks in the driveway. This place definitely looked abandoned. I walked up to the porch, my shoes crunching on gravel and dead leaves. The steps creaked under my weight. I set the bag down by the front door and took the required photo for the app, then turned to leave. That's when I heard it, knocking. Not from inside the house, from behind me. I spun around and there was someone standing at the edge of my headlights, just standing there on the lawn, maybe 20 feet away. I couldn't make out any features because the light was behind them, just a silhouette, average height, wearing what looked like a hoodie. "Hey," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Your food's here, on the porch." They didn't respond. They just stood there. "I'm gonna go," I said, and started walking back toward my car. They moved with me. Not toward me, but parallel, keeping the same distance, like they were circling. I stopped walking. They stopped too. My heart was pounding now. Something was very, very wrong. I pulled out my phone like I was going to call someone, hoping that would scare them off, but they still didn't move or say anything. I decided to just make a run for it. I bolted to my car, jumped in, and locked the doors. The figure was still standing there in the same spot, not moving. I threw the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway way too fast, nearly hitting the mailbox. As I drove away, I watched them in my rearview mirror. They turned and walked toward the house, calm as anything, and disappeared around the side. I was shaking the entire drive home. When I got back to my apartment, I immediately checked the app to see if the customer had marked the order as delivered. They had. 5 stars, even. No tip, but whatever. I was just glad it was over, except it wasn't over. 2 nights later, I got another order. Same Chinese restaurant. I accepted it without checking the address because I was on autopilot, and it wasn't until I'd already picked up the food that I looked at where it was going. 4758 Oak Ridge Drive. I pulled over immediately and just stared at my phone. There's no way this was a coincidence. People don't order from the same restaurant to an abandoned house twice in 1 week. I should have canceled the order. I should have driven straight home and blocked the address in my app. But I didn't. I don't know why. Curiosity maybe, or stubbornness, or just the fact that I needed the money and couldn't afford too many cancellations on my record. I drove back to that street. This time I parked a few houses down, not right in the driveway. I sat there with my headlights off, trying to see if there were any lights on in the house. There weren't. It looked exactly the same as it had 2 nights earlier. Dead and empty. I called the customer. The app lets you do that, though it goes through a masked number so they can't see your real phone. It rang 4 times, then went to a generic voicemail. I hung up. I sat there for probably 10 minutes debating what to do. Finally, I decided I'd just leave the food at the end of the driveway and take the photo from there. Close enough to count as delivered, far enough that I didn't have to get near the house. I got out of my car with the bag and walked maybe halfway up the driveway. That's when I noticed the footprints. The yard was wet from rain earlier that day, and there were muddy footprints all over the grass near the front porch. A lot of them. Like someone had been pacing back and forth. They led from the porch to the side of the house and back, over and over. I dropped the bag right there in the driveway, uh, took the photo, and ran back to my car. As I was pulling away, I looked at the house one more time. There was someone in the window, second floor, far, far right, just standing there, looking out. I reported the address to the delivery app the next day, told them the house was abandoned and someone was using the address to mess with drivers. They said they'd look into it. I don't know if they ever did. I haven't gotten an order to that address since, but I've also stopped accepting orders on the east side of town entirely. I can't risk it. Here's what I keep thinking about though. When I looked at the order details later that night, I noticed something I'd missed before. The customer name was just a single letter, J. My name is Jason, and the phone number listed on the account? I tried calling it again a few days later just to see. It rang once and someone picked up but didn't say anything. I could hear breathing on the other end. I hung up immediately and blocked the number. I don't do delivery anymore. I got a job at a warehouse. The pay is worse, but at least I know where I'm going every day. I still drive past Oak Ridge Drive sometimes on my way to other places. I've never worked up the courage to go down it again, but I've seen that for sale sign is gone now. I'm only posting this because I genuinely don't know what else to do. This has been going on for about 5 months now, and it's getting worse. I've tried talking to people in my life about it, but everyone just tells me I'm stressed or overthinking things. Maybe I am, but I don't think so. My name is Rachel. I'm 26 and I work as a dental hygienist in a suburb outside of Phoenix. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and I actually like my job most days. I'm good with people and I don't mind the routine of it. Same office, same coworkers, same types of appointments day after day. The office where I work is small. There's Dr. Chen, who owns the practice, 2 other hygienists besides me, and a receptionist named Marcy, who's been there for like 15 years. We see maybe 20 to 30 patients a day, depending on the schedule. It's a pretty standard setup. Most of our patients are regulars, families who've been coming for years, older people who need frequent cleanings, that kind of thing. You get to know people after a while. You remember their kids' names, what they do for work, whether they floss, or just lie about it. About 5 months ago, we got a new patient. His name was David Roscoe, at least that's what was on his intake form. He'd booked a standard cleaning and checkup, nothing unusual. Marcy scheduled him for a Tuesday afternoon, one of my slots. When he came in, my first thought was that he seemed normal. Maybe late 30s, medium build, wearing business casual clothes like he'd just come from an office job. He was polite when Marcy checked him in and he filled out all his paperwork without any issues. I brought him back to my chair and did the usual routine. Asked about his dental history, when his last cleaning was, if he had any pain or sensitivity. He said he hadn't been to a dentist in a few years, but wanted to start taking better care of his teeth. Totally reasonable. The appointment itself was fine. He didn't talk much, which isn't unusual. A lot of people don't like small talk when someone's got tools in their mouth. He had decent teeth, nothing major wrong. I did the cleaning, Dr. Chen came in for the quick exam, and that was it. 45 minutes, standard procedure. When I walked him back out to the front desk, he scheduled his next appointment for 6 months out. Marcy gave him a reminder card and he left. I didn't think about him again. Until he came back 2 weeks later. Marcy called me up to the front desk and said David Roscoe was there, claiming he had an appointment. I checked the schedule and he definitely didn't. His next appointment wasn't for another 5.5 months. When I told him that, he looked confused and said he'd gotten a reminder call the day before confirming a cleaning for today. We hadn't called him. Marcy showed him the schedule on her computer. He apologized, said there must have been a mix-up and left. Weird, but not that weird. People get their wires crossed sometimes. 3 days later, he was back. Same thing. Showed up insisting he had an appointment. We told him he didn't. He seemed frustrated this time, said he'd gotten another reminder call. Guess we assured him we hadn't called and suggested maybe he was thinking of a different dental office. He left again. Then it started happening every few days. He'd show up, usually in the afternoon, always insisting he had an appointment. Sometimes he'd say he got a call, sometimes he'd say he got a text. Once he said he'd received an email confirmation. We'd show him the schedule, prove we hadn't contacted him, and he'd apologize and leave. After the 6th or 7th time, Dr. A. Chen pulled him aside and asked if everything was okay. David said he was sorry for the confusion, that he must be mixing something up, and he wouldn't bother us anymore. But he kept coming back. It got to the point where Marcy would see him walk through the door and just shake her head at him. We stopped being polite about it. I told him directly that he needed to stop showing up without an appointment, and that if he kept doing it, we'd have to ask him not to come back at all. He looked me right in the eye and said, "But you're the one who keeps calling me." I told him we weren't calling him. I showed him our call log. His number wasn't in it, except for the one time Marcy had called to confirm his original appointment months ago. He pulled out his phone and showed me his call history. There were dozens of calls from our office number. Different times, different days, all showing as incoming calls from us. I didn't know what to say. It was our number. I recognized it, but we weren't calling him. Dr. Chen got involved at that point and said we needed to figure out what was going on. We called our phone provider and asked if there was any way someone could be spoofing our number to call this guy. They said it was technically possible, but didn't know why someone would do that. We told David we were looking into it and asked him to please stop coming in until we figured it out. He agreed. For about a week, he didn't show up. I thought maybe whatever was happening had stopped. Then I started getting the calls. The first one came at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. I was already in bed, half asleep when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, so I let it go to voicemail. No message. The next night, same number, same time. I answered it this time. Nobody said anything. I could hear background noise like static or maybe wind, but no voice. After about 10 seconds, the line went dead. It happened again the next night, and the night after that. Always around 11 p.m., always the same number, always silence on the other end. I blocked the number. The calls kept coming from different numbers. After about 2 weeks of this, I was losing my mind. I wasn't sleeping well, and I was constantly on edge. I snapped at patients during the day, and I stopped answering my phone entirely after 9 p.m. Then David showed up at my apartment. I don't know how he got my address. It's not listed anywhere public. I don't have social media with my last name on it. But one Saturday morning, I looked out my window and saw him standing across the street, just looking at my building. I called the police immediately. By the time they showed up, he was gone. They took a report and said they'd talk to him, but without him actually doing anything threatening, there wasn't much they could do. The officer who took my statement asked if I'd had any prior relationship with this person. I told him no, he was just a patient who'd come in once for a cleaning. The officer gave me this look like he didn't quite believe me, which made me furious, but I kept my mouth shut. David came back 3 more times over the next 2 weeks. Always just standing across the street, never approaching, never doing anything, just watching. I stayed with my sister for a few days after that. When I came back, I'd installed a Ring doorbell and I'd started parking in the underground garage instead of on the street. The calls kept coming. Different numbers every time, always silent. About a month ago, things escalated. I came home from work and my apartment door was unlocked. I know I'd locked it that morning. I always lock it. I stood in the hallway for a full minute trying to decide if I should go in or call the police. I called the police. They came and searched my apartment. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. No signs of forced entry. The officer said maybe I'd just forgotten to lock it and I should be more careful, but I knew I'd locked it. 2 weeks after that, I found a note slid under my door. It was handwritten on plain white paper. All it said was, "You're not listening." I filed another police report. They said they'd follow up. I don't think they ever did. I had my locks changed after that. I bought pepper spray. I told everyone at work what was happening and showed them David's photo from our patient files so they'd know not to let him in the building. He hasn't come to the office in over a month now. But the calls haven't stopped. And 3 nights ago, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of me taken from outside my apartment window sitting on my couch watching TV. I was wearing the same clothes I had on in that exact moment. I ran to the window and looked out, but I didn't see anyone. I called the police again. They're treating it more seriously now, finally. They said it could be stalking and harassment, and they're trying to track down David to question him. But here's the thing that's really messing with me. I called the dental office yesterday to pull David's file to give all his information to the police. Marcy couldn't find it. She looked through everything, digital and paper, and there's no record of anyone named David Roscoe ever being a patient. I know he was. I cleaned his teeth myself. I remember the appointment. Dr. Chen remembers examining him, but according to our system, he was never there. I don't know what's happening anymore. I don't know if I'm safe. And I definitely don't know how someone can just disappear from records like that. The calls are still coming. Last night, it was 4 times between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. I haven't been sleeping much.